How is everybody doing? I am Tomlin's Nyback. I think. No, yes, I am. Not my real name, but I want to have a little fun with this project. So I get to be a pseudo name, like have a Batman, you know, like a superhero stuff. The Black Panther, racism, um, but yeah, so that's my screen name, Tomlin's Nyback. This is 365 Days Towards Racial Change. This is day 292. You are a trooper if you've watched all of this. You know, that's over 100 some hours. You split that in half roughly, right? Uh, and you've watched a lot of me, this little monologue. Yeah, if I ever do this again, or if I find a way, I might put a soundtrack on there, some kind of intro. Uh, very quiet, but that's okay. I want to focus here. If you stay awake, you're good too. I I went to a vocational school, and my shop teacher was a little old fashioned. This was before Bill Gates' operating system and the explosion of Microsoft and these things that occurred uh, at the end of the '80s and the eruption of technology and stuff. So this guy was teaching us uh, physics, um, about radios and stuff like that inside integrated circuits. I'm sure the technology has moved along considerably by now, but I understand some of the fundamental basics of how all this stuff works, right? So anyway, a lot of our time was spent, that 4 years, was watching these black and white army videos about radios, oscilloscopes and stuff, and it was this dry white dude. He never laughed. He was just telling us about the equipment and radio waves and such. You talk about an exercise and staying awake. Yeah. And that wasn't a little half hour conversation. It was, sometimes up to an hour, hour and a half sometimes of this, you know, monotone. You know what I'm talking about. Oh boy. How are you getting along? You know, this is quite a journey. I'll never look at America again. I'm in a period. I'm wrapping up kind of this 2 year bubble. I'll say that God, I'm not going to proselytize or preach, but I believe the universe, God, higher power, gave me 2 years to do the best I could with, and finishing up with a degree in philosophy and um, doing this work, going through this education. And so the disillusionment, sometimes it's been rough. It's the truth of America. It's like a couple days ago I talked about bad parenting. That's up there with Darth Vader. Luke, I'm your father. And the Luke Skywalker actors, no, uh, because you want to think of your parents, your community, your nation as uh, this benevolent, infallible um, entity, person, and then you've got your suspicions, but then you find out the truth, right? You get some affirmation of what's been swirling around in your heart, right? And growing up, I saw roots in the '70s. I saw, I was educated early, an early age about slavery in America and how America's going through different uh, issues, almost violent, violent at times around labor, civil rights, suffrage, you know, things like that. And, I'm going through school allowed to think and believe that these issues are dead in America. We had our '60s, we had our labor things, maybe in the '40s and stuff, um, '50s, but those are behind us. America has its moments, and then it moves on, and these issues are resolved, and we're never they never have to darken our news cycle and television sets anymore. How wrong, uh, how wrong I was in that thinking, even in the face of seeing racism, experiencing it. I didn't understand it as a present as racism as a present phenomenon informing my experience and the experience of others, right? Uh, and then it just eventually it breaks through. I wonder. I think it would have broken through. I think I would have been on the search, even if I had not run into Dr. Anderson's work, the Uncle Tom's Cabin. Oh, some resources. I got a good friend, a fan here, gave me some good resources about slavery, civil rights. The summer of 2019, I went to the African American Cultural Museum in Washington, D.C. You know, I, I think it would have had to break in on me eventually. It's tough to live in America and believe that these problems from slavery do not still exist. And I say from slavery, the issue with darker skinned people, non white folks, and tensions and the dysfunctional way that can develop, I'm sure it goes back farther than American slavery and its little uh, 1500s, you know, uh, black people globally, I think have always faced a challenge, from lighter skinned groups, whether it's Northern Africa, Middle East, Far East, definitely Europe, right? Um, but black people still prevail, get around somehow. Unfortunately, just recently, Somalia had a big car bomb event. Upwards 60 plus people killed. And you just hadn't heard much about Somalia lately, but then there's upheaval there. Well, we got our upheavals again, cycling through. Iraq is back on the radar. It was very quiet for a time there. Now it's back on the radar. So it's interesting to see some of this, some of the challenges keep recircling. And here, white man comes running with his interest, you know, uh, with his force and military and stuff. Never quite able to come to resolution, but it's just this unfinished drama that refuses to resolve. Black folk, are you mindful of this, right? You know, about our participation. When I went to that museum down in D.C., black people were involved in every conflict, whether it's westward expansion, I'm talking the creation of this nation, military conflicts, Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War One, Two, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq. Black people are always there, Yet we have this experience in our own homeland. Um, we're participating in American life to the nth degree, to the fullest. Yet our own neighbors, our own land, our own government, those lethargic business, lethargic in um, opening the doors, giving us a sense of being included, participating in the franchise, you know, um, getting the wealth and resources as our white and lighter colored counterparts. Right? That's one of the blessings, I'll tell you, of me doing this work is like I realize I'm supposed to get compensated for skilled labor. Um, I don't substitute for people and stay at the same level. White people elevate when they get a skill and bring it into the blue collar world. You know, everybody should. Yet for the longest time, I'd elevate and not get the resources. I didn't even know that this stuff was happening to me. That I'm supposed to get a bump in pay when I increase my skills. But I do now. So I'm armed at least. Um, Now it's my calculus as far as participating in the workforce. I hope to get out of it. I want to get my own thing going. It's coming. But you know, I'm supposed to have a living wage. The managers at the place I just left had my meltdown and their tensions and racism. You know, they got living wages, vehicles, they're carrying insurance, they have a living space, right? I'm supposed to have that if I'm going to be doing like work. You need to be mindful of that too and get situated. Don't just leave, of course. Have some backup, have a plan, but at least educate yourself that what are you supposed to be making if you're an employee, right? Um, Supposed to get a living wage, so things, you know, your white counterpart gets a living wage to do that. Should be no different for you. I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Read three of his works. I would encourage you to get these books. He's got plenty of resources here on YouTube, all over the internet. But I read three books that really got me going, and we've used these books to inform us for this project. A Black History Reader: 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth: Search for Power and Economic Justice. And Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, powernomics.com. You can find them at powernomics.com. This is Powernomics. I always slips out. Never mind. Behind me, you see the hashtag #UsTooSimilar. You find black women coming together, supporting one another. Very important stuff. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGAENUF. Oh, kind of a black Facebook social page place. Let's go see Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School if you have the entrepreneurial mind. And And like I said, we're finishing off Harriet Beecher Stowe's great work, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I don't know if we'll revisit it before the project is finished. We might. There's a lot of stuff we can go back on and review, but there's a lot of more, much more material ahead of us as well on these last 70 so days going on here. Okay, day 292. We'll start out talking about the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. Now, there's been many slave acts. There's been many emancipations and all kinds of things, moments, whether it's by state or nationally, what you would consider national at the time, uh, to manipulate the populace, I'd say. The 1850 Fugitive Slave Act is no different. Harriet Beecher Stowe talks about this. Among a lot of things that motivated her to do this, her work, is 45 chapters. From hearing the Josiah Henson story, reading that, other stories, her tipping point was the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, and what that was intertwined with westward expansion, bringing new states into the Union, or the the government at that time. But one thing, you had the slave states really pushing for some tougher action, because I guess by 1850 it was almost like an exodus. The North facilitated a lot of the escape for slaves. It was getting harder and harder to get fugitives back because officials in the North were not obligated to help. And this 1850s act compelled Northern officials, and sheriffs and judges and whatnot, to be obligated, compelled them to help return fugitive slaves to the South. Right, all things being equal, if we were on board with the industry, slave industry, uh, you might even say, okay, all right, it's like if my car is stolen, right? If my computer got up and ran off, I'd want somebody to get it, bring it back, right? Well, the problem with this Slave Act, and I think this may be what really pushed Harriet Beecher Stowe over the edge, was that you didn't have to have proof that a black person was escaped from the South, right? We don't have a central database, pictures and stuff. I mean, what would slavery be like if it was like credit reporting, or uh, being on a felony watch list or something like that? Would you picture all this stuff electronically, instantaneous throughout the land? Slavery would be a lot different, but it wasn't. So you could imagine, that these occasionally, uh, more than occasionally, you find some nefarious poor person maybe needs you know, some kind of a financial boost. Just go grab some black person that looks weak and sell them off down the river. There's no communication. There's no verifications. No, you don't need a justification. I mean, you can just pull this lone black person out and send them on their way, and then fill your purse. So that may be really, hearing stories like that could have really pushed Harriet over the edge. So, she mentions this 1850s act and about her being just emotionally stirred and things like that. The whole thing shocked Harriet. You know, um, I'm always impressed. I've got some white friends I've had extensive conversations with about racism, and I scratch my head at their genuine concern over the privileges of white people in America. It's an enigma to me. It was like someone trying to explain to me what it's like to walk on the moon or something, because uh, I don't picture the dominant group having any sympathizers, genuine sympathizers with the disadvantaged group, but they exist. I've talked to them. Harriet would have been a person I hopefully would have been friends with to a degree, and I could hear her sometimes maybe on her soapbox or her banner for us, right? So so she's hearing these stories. Not only okay, now there's cruelty. She hears murders, kidnappings, rape, things like that. It's interesting. You don't hear about lynchings anywhere in her book. It hasn't either. It's not as prevalent or not on her radar. I'm sure it is. Um, it is a phenomenon in the land, but I don't remember reading any lynchings in her book. Maybe I got to go back and review. In either case, it's not a prominent feature. Uh, the murdering of black people in the night, or even publicly. Uh, but she's got enough ammunition anyway. She's got murder, rape, families being split, whatever. And now there's this law where black people don't even have to be guilty of running away. They could be free black people, and they could be snatched. And the northern governments, uh, governors, mayors, constables, are now compelled, obligated to help out. And you don't know how closely these law enforcement people adhered to the rule, but it was another way of increasing the tension towards civil war for both sides. You know, now you've got uh, this group, almost dictating law to their northern neighbors. So I'm sure that could not have sat well in the long term, and only increased to fed tensions there between the two parties that are getting ready to have the bloodiest war of America's history. Harriet is shocked and what's not. Further, yeah, parodies. We have a lot of religious sentiment and imagery in the text. It even got, and I say a lot, I consider myself to have a relationship, with God, higher power, whatnot. But even a few days ago, I was like, man, this religious thing it's weighing on me heavily. And I even kind of intimated that it was a little much for some of Tom's final moments on Earth. But that aside, she's obviously has religious convictions. So on top of everything else that's stimulating her to be an advocate for black people, slaves. She's concerned about the church. Now, the church is, yeah, like Ophelia, if you remember Ophelia's character and her attitude and her churchiness about, and her attitude toward the slaves, we found in the text that she may have had a genuine relationship with God, but it did not get any traction in her relationship with black people. So that was one thing. But overall, the churches up north, in a sense, had the idea that, yeah, there's slavery in the South, but they're just working them a little hard. And yeah, of course, they have to whip them once in a while and stuff like that. Um, and they probably did their best to shield themselves from hearing too much about the rapes and sex and intermingling between the white slave master and the black slave. I can't picture the conservative church at the time going out of its way to hear that kind of tabloid um, behavior from their white, you know, they're part of the same white people, right? So they don't want to hear too much ugliness about that. But even all that aside, she's like, she has a sense, or she feels that the church is nearly condoning this Fugitive Slave Act. That doesn't sit well with Harriet at all. The church in her mind, just like the Quakers, the Protestant church needs to be right out front of the march and the initiatives to get these people free, liberated, uh, and liberated. We find later at the end of the book, she's more in favor of sending the blacks away, living separately. If she's come this far, then I'm hoping that if we transport her to this time, she would want these blacks who are Americans to rise up, be competitive in the land, and participate equally. But back then it was different. So the church, she wants the church to be the carrying the banner, leading the charge, exercising its influence to have these people freed. So much of her, so you find her in her response. It'd be interesting to see what was happening in current events in relation to her writing each chapter of the book, because there is kind of this religious motion in her book. It quiets down and then it really elevates at some point. You wonder if it correlates with the current events of her time. She's, she aims this, and this is in that last chapter. She's aiming this energy at the church because the church is almost nearly condoning this behavior, but the church is ignorant of the truth of slavery in America. What's going on with people like Tom, Prue, Cassie. Oh, Frederick Douglass's story, eyewitness to a slave murder, right? So a lot of this stuff is the church may not be aware of. So her book is kind of an expose of a lot of that, and so she's aiming some of this text at a naive church, and that the church needs to get on board and participate and work to see these slaves liberated or what have you. Listen, I'm out of time. I'm not going to hold you hostage. You know I don't like to hold you too long here. So I'm out of time. That's day 292 out of the way. 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tom Nyback. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.